Hi, I'm so excited to be here with Laura Okmin. She's a great friend of mine and she does all the sidelines for the NFL. So, Laura, I know usually you interview people, but now I'm going to interview
I'm
you.
so nervous about this. I'm so nervous about this right now, and I wish everyone could see the smile on your face to understand why I'm so nervous about this right now.
Okay, so my clients,
Yes.
my NFL clients and my coaching clients want to know how should they be with the media. So, can you just talk in general about what were great interviews, when have people made mistakes, and what should somebody do when they interview with you?
It's such a loaded question, and it's funny because I think my answer probably has changed over years. You know, when I was a young pup trying to get an answer and learning how to do interviews myself, and now where I've done so much with players and spent so many years building trust and building a relationship that I'm probably a little more protective now with this. So I love this topic right now. My favorite interviews, boy, it's anything that I haven't heard someone say before. You know, how I prepare is I research the heck out of somebody, and I might sit and have 4 pages of questions, but my goal is to start an interview off with the first question that I already know, oh, here's what I'm going to ask. And then I hope to never ask a single question that I wrote down, because I want someone to surprise me. I want someone to tell me something I didn't read already about his or her life. And that responsibility is both ways. That's on the reporter to ask good questions. And that's also on the interviewee, how open they want to be and how much they want to divulge. And that's my favorite interview. I love interviewing Steve Smith. Baltimore, I was about to say Carolina Panthers, Baltimore Ravens, Steve Smith, because I never know what he's going to say. And it's so much fun. It's so much fun. And that's the trick is for a reporter, and this is more on the reporter, unfortunately, than on the interviewee, but you don't want to be an interview, you want to be a conversation. And those are the best when it's a or genuine conversation. And I think my biggest piece of advice to players and coaches is develop relationships with people you trust and really find out who. There's people who don't trust anybody and just kind of use that, that one broad stroke of I don't trust the media. There will always be a time where you want to get your story out, and hopefully not any of your clients, but there's a time where you might need to. Something might happen where you need somebody to defend who you are. That everybody piles on and somebody goes, actually, I do know him, and I can tell you this, and say the report or write the column. So my biggest piece of advice that I tell players who I've really developed relationships is it doesn't have to be me, but find someone you trust and really utilize that relationship. Because as much as I love a great, honest conversation, I also would say don't divulge everything to everybody. That's still a privilege, and that sometimes you give that to the wrong people, or you give a great story to someone who might not be able to, that you don't trust, and all of a sudden it turns into a whole different story. So there's trust that you have to develop.
Okay, so are there some people in the media that you wouldn't trust?
If I was going to give my story, there'd absolutely be people that I would go to that I know. I love how and some I'm very good friends with and some I don't know. But I love how they tell a story, and I love how they listen. And that doesn't always mean the most positive story. Some of my best interviews have been with players who had something going on in their life that they'd rather not talk about, but they trust me enough to know that it's going to be a fair conversation. And I think that's also it, where sometimes people will say that you can talk about a reporter who builds that relationship and go to them for a fluff piece, but that couldn't be further from the truth. If you get to know somebody, that's who you want to go to them for tough times, because they'll be fair, and you want them asking the tough questions, versus just 25 people shouting at you that you don't know. So there's people I would absolutely go to, and there's people I wouldn't go to.
Okay.
And I'm sure guys hear that in the locker rooms, or coaches always hear that, who they trust, who they read it, or they see the reports, or what reputations are. As much as we study them and how they are with the media, hopefully they all study us and find out kind of what we're all about.
Oh, interesting. So you're saying people should study the media.
I'm just big into people. I'm big into relationships. I'm big into studying people and their character, whoever they are. So yes.
Okay. So recently we had a lot of stuff in the media with domestic violence.
Yeah.
So some people, particularly Roger Goodell, got a lot of criticism for how he handled that. When something comes up that's a very, very sensitive subject to people in society, what do you recommend that people do, and how should they handle those sensitive situations where one of their players gets in trouble, or even a coach gets in trouble, they get a DUI? How do you think that should be handled?
Honesty. I mean, it's all coming out quickly, trying to don't give everybody the time to find layers or create layers or find layers and keep digging, get ahead of it. And if you can be honest, and I think that's the most important thing, is honesty. And I think it's also showing who you are. I think that we are a very forgiving group of people. When I say we, I'm not saying the media. I'm saying as a whole, we're very forgiving, and we love second chances. I don't only believe those are the best stories. They're the ones I like to cover, and I know I like to watch. As a person, I love to root for people to succeed. So I think it's being honest with what you did, and I think it's showing humility, and I think it's remembering that you're not talking to a camera and the media, where a lot of people want to get defensive because you might not like the way people have been writing the story, or you might be sitting there in a group of 15 people and recognize a face you don't like and want to say something there. You have to remember you're talking to people at home, and that's really who you're trying to tell your story to. But that's the biggest thing. I think that's our athletes, and that's our politicians, that's anybody. The first thing you say is, did you believe them? And I think that's it. So it's honesty and it's humility.
Okay, what about like if you're doing sidelines during a game,
Mm-hmm.
and it's halftime,
Mm-hmm.
and one team's winning and one team's losing, and you go up to the coach and you say, "What happened, coach? Why are you losing by 30 points? What are you going to say to your team at halftime?"
It is the most, it's the part of the sideline job that I probably love and hate the most. I love it because I always think of the privilege of the millions of people watching this game and yelling at their coach at halftime and going, "What are you doing? And why aren't you doing this?" I'm the only person in the world who gets to go ask at halftime. So I'm aware of the privilege, and I love the privilege. And you wouldn't believe the conversations I have at halftime, which is, some are great and some meaning not so great. But I think the most important thing is, again, it goes to the relationships, that I know the coaches, and I never am introducing myself before I stick a mic in someone's face and go, well, why are you down 30? So I think it's one, making sure they know you know what you're talking about. That's the most important thing. So it's not just being friends with them, it's making them respect you. And I think there's a way of doing that. I wouldn't want to be in the middle of a show and all of a sudden we go to commercial break and I have, somebody in my face going, "Why do you suck? Like you keep screwing up words, you're saying wrong things." So I'm aware of that. So I think there's a way of asking good questions, good informed questions. And probably the biggest thing is, I think a little bit like a fan in terms of, what do I really want to know? And I listen to my guys in my ear. I'm listening to, on Sundays, it's Tom Brenneman and David Deal. And on Thursdays, it's Ian Eagle. I listen to what they've been talking about the first half. So that helps direct me too. That what they've been talking about and why can't they get the run game going? And if I hear them ask that, the whole first half, well, why aren't they able to? I'm able to go right down to that coach and go, why aren't you getting the running game going? And so it helps the flow of the broadcast, so I'm able to say, I heard you guys talking about that. Actually, I asked this coach, and here's what he said. But that goes to, if I could give coaches advice,
yes,
the greatest thing at halftime is, I get you're not going to give a game plan. We understand that. But we're trying to do our jobs as they're trying to do theirs, and I'm so appreciative of the coaches who give information. And there's a way of giving good information without giving your game plan away. And I think they understand that's our job. That's why we're there. And I'm very appreciative. I'm very appreciative of that. Well, when I look at my matchups every week, when Fox gives us, here's the next 3 games or whatever, I look at weather pretty quickly. Look at games. I look at what 2 teams we have, weather, and I look at coaches, because that dictates my day. Is, do I have 2 good coaches who are going to give me information, or do I have 2 coaches who I'm going to really kind of tap dance at halftime and sort of try to figure out how am I going to give some information when I got none?
So give me an example of what would be good information, but not giving away the game plan.
I think it's it's saying what's happening. It's not just saying, every coach would say the same thing who's not able to get into a rhythm offensively. They're going to say, we're not doing enough on first and second downs, and we've got to get third and manageable situations. I can tell you right now, before tomorrow's game, I don't care which coach, whoever's trailing is going to tell me they need to get the run game going. We need to tackle better, and we need to get in third and manageable situations. I know all that, but the good ones give a little more information. They'll say, people always ask about adjustments, but they've already made them, and that's probably one of the biggest fallacies, where they've been working on that. Halftime is not where they're like, hey, let's decide, what's working, what's not. But sometimes they'll say, you know what, we know, we've been watching our matchups. Second half, we think we're going to be able to work on this one a little bit more. That we're going to get our outside guys a little bit more involved. Offensively, we're going to go to our outside receivers. We like that matchup. They'll give something like that. Or sometimes I'll have a coach who feels really good. This just happened a couple weeks ago. And the coach came out and they were trailing and said, we have the ball. We feel really good. We're coming out and we're going to start up tempo. We haven't done that yet. We're going to go up to our outside receivers, up tempo, and we're going to move down the field and we're going to score. And I said it, and you cross your fingers because that report can be really stupid, and that's exactly what they did. So that's gold. When somebody gives you, here's what we're going to do, I'm able to say, here's what they're going to do, look for this. So probably that's the best thing a coach is doing. They're educating us. Here's what isn't working. Is it because we haven't done it, or is it because they're doing it to us? I always love that question, because why? We all know you all want to come out and do that, do this. Why aren't you doing that?
So some coaches are naturally great at that, and some aren't.
Yes.
So
but you're not going to ask me who, right?
I'm not going to ask you who, but if I have a client and I want to educate them, what are some maybe like 5 tips you could tell them to do? If you don't want to come up with 5 tips, 3 tips. 3 tips, because I'm a new head coach.
Okay.
I don't know the media. This is my first game. And I've got a microphone in my face at the halftime, and I'm trailing.
That's hard, because I wouldn't be very trusting. The first thing, if someone was doing that to me, and sometimes I'll have somebody shadowing me for a game that I don't know, and I watch to see what questions they ask, what are they looking at. I look and go, how much am I giving you? Because I want to know how much I'm trusting you, how serious are you about this, how much football do you really know? I look at all that. So I can only imagine what a coach does. The NFL is easier than college for a coach in terms of, we don't put the microphone in their face. It's just a conversation. College, they've got to get on camera and answer 1 to 2 questions.
Yeah.
Which I never like. A coach is never going to be good that way to me. But I walk off the field with them. I set up on Fridays and Saturdays, which way do you want me to go, coach? Am I walking in with you, or am I walking out with you? So they already know halftime where they're going with me. And it's a conversation. So my advice is remembering that it's a partnership. I can't even think of breaking down 3 or 5 things, because each game is so different of what answers they're going to give. But I think it's remembering that it's a partnership, and it always looks better if you give something. It just does. And I think it helps relationships. And I do think one of the great things about being with Fox or CBS or NFL Network, when we do the games, we're partners. We're not there to stir it up. We're there to help and make guys look good. Or if you're not helping, it's not like we try to make anyone look bad, but I think it's remembering that relationship. And every coach knows how to do coach speak. You're able to give things to someone without giving them everything. If any coach you have at whatever level, I know what masters they are at that. And whatever sport, they're all great at that. So I think it's really that. It's giving something. It's giving some information. It's answering questions instead of feeling like you're protecting everything and being defensive. And I've been fortunate. I can't, honestly, there's maybe 1 or 2 coaches I would tell you and will tell you when this podcast is done who does that. But otherwise, it's a pretty good group. And even down, there are coaches, I can tell you right now, Lovie Smith can be down 30 points in the season he has been, and I will see him at halftime, and he will greet me the same way he does if he's up 30, and he will give me the same information, and that's a pleasure.
Oh yeah, and tomorrow we're going to the Cleveland-Tampa game, so you'll get to see Levy. I just realized that.
Yep,
Yeah.
so I know what I'm going to get. This is the first time, because with Fox we don't do many AFC teams, so I met Mike Pettin for the first time on Friday. Loved him, just in a half-hour conversation with my team and him. Sometimes coaches are completely different on Sunday afternoons at halftime, so I'm excited to see what he's like. I'm hoping it's the same guy I met Friday, because he was tremendous.
And did you get to meet Ray Farmer?
I have not. No, I did not see him.
Oh, I love Ray. Yeah.
And I will make sure to go introduce myself Sunday and bring up your name.
Yeah, Ray's great. You're gonna like him. Okay, so let's talk about the draft, the NFL draft. When players are getting ready for the draft, especially high picks, get a lot more media attention than maybe they're used to. Some of them come from a college where they maybe did have a lot of media attention. But what's your advice there, especially like offensive linemen or defensive linemen, where they maybe weren't in the spotlight as much as they might be if they were the first pick in the draft? What's your advice to those young men? And they're 22 years old, and
this is in learning this world, which is, gosh, there's so many layers to it. It's hard. It's the same thing I tell young reporters when they're just getting going, which is you need reps. You know, it's just, there's no way to fake being comfortable. You either are or you aren't. And if you haven't been doing a lot of interviews, there's always exceptions. Some guys are just naturally fantastic, but there's other guys who need some reps. So I say don't be scared of it, and really embrace it, and look forward to it, versus feeling like it's a punishment, or feeling like, you know, you're taking medicine, that I don't want to do it. I think if you can exhale and you can enjoy it, and you can help lead it sometimes. You know, if there's something you want to talk about, you can lead a conversation in that direction. You can do that. You can have a little bit of, I think sometimes guys feel like they just have to sit there and answer 3 questions that somebody asks, where if the person asking you questions isn't making, if you don't feel like they've done their research, which a lot of times that happens, or it's questions you've answered a million times, if you're able to put your personality in it a little bit, or you're able to tell a story, that's my biggest thing. How when I watch a guy, if I want to interview him or do a longer feature on him, I want someone with personality. I want someone who shares. I want someone who's engaging. I want somebody who I think I'm going to get something out of. And I think it's just learning how to be comfortable. And again, I'm not one of those who says tell everybody everything.
Yeah, what if they have something to hide? That was my next
That's a really
question.
tricky.
You know, someone who's done some, because, you know, 18 to 22-year-old males coming out of college are not perfect.
No, 18 to 22-year-old girls, I wouldn't have wanted to sit and talk about every decision I made out of college at 22 and had to answer to people about why I did stupid things.
Exactly. But that's what happens to these players,
Yeah, totally.
especially when they go to the combine in Indianapolis and they're being interviewed by all these scouts and GMs and media, and it's a pretty tough situation to put.
I remember the first time when I started going as a young reporter, and how overwhelmed I was. Just, oh my gosh, you're around 50 people and everybody's screaming questions, and how intimidated I was going, you know, this is when there wasn't very many women, but having to find my voice. And I'd always think to myself, now imagine if you were that guy, that everybody's converged. It's intimidating just asking a question of somebody. So I can't imagine that. That's got to be, I don't care how comfortable you are. There's certain guys, moth to a flame, who, you know, love that camera.
Yeah.
But most guys aren't used to it. I think if there's something to hide, you know what I'm going to say, it's being honest. And you own your story. And if you're not, how great to go into every interview and not fear it, and know, you know, what you got. And I think that's practicing with your agent. I think that's media training. I think that's, hopefully they've worked with some media classes in college. But I think there's a way of telling your story and telling your mistakes before everybody asks you about it, so you can control it.
So if you were to set up a media training, how would you do that?
I'd want to, you know, I probably want to sit with somebody and do different kinds of interviewing where it's starting off, here's 10 questions you're going to get. Here's 1 to 10, and it's just, sometimes reporters aren't even listening. They're just remembering what their next question is, and there's no engagement whatsoever. And that's probably a majority of interviews guys get. So I'd want to practice with that. And then I'd want to go totally off script and see how natural, and see if you can just have a conversation. And I think what I try to do, what my trick is to get people comfortable, if you and I were doing this podcast, and so if I was doing the interview, so we'd have a camera behind you, a camera behind me, a camera over here, and what I tell my producers and my cameramen, do not say we're rolling. Because a lot of times I'm sitting here for 5 to 10 minutes while we're miking you and fixing the lights real quick, and what I'm doing is getting you right here with me. So I'm getting you to open up. We're talking about your kids. We're talking about how it was practiced. And then all of a sudden someone goes, okay, we're rolling. And it just breaks everything. Where you're like, we just 10 minutes to try to get you to in. So my favorite thing is when all of a sudden we'll be in the middle of an interview and a guy will go, when are we going to do this? I'm like, we've been rolling for the last 15 minutes. This is the interview. You want it that comfortable.
Right.
And I almost think if I was getting a guy and hopefully training, you want them to have that experience. Not just those 10 questions of, here's answer this, but just sitting like this and talking, because I think then maybe it makes you forget about the cameras and you kind of lock in on a good conversation, and you realize how much fun you can have, how much you can enjoy it.
Yeah, like you're talking to your friend.
Yeah, exactly. So I think most guys are going to get there at some point. You just hope a little bit earlier. But I think that's the biggest thing with media training too, is also, is the reporter training, is the agent training, is a marketing PR firm training, because am I training you am I training you to make you look good, or am I training you because you're endorsing this product? So there's so many different ways. A lot of times what teams do is train a guy. If I ask you, what's the most important thing you have to do to get this offense going, they will train you to repeat the question. The most important thing that we have to do to get this offense rolling today is, and that's sort of old school, that everyone used to be taught that way.
Oh, okay.
And it's almost like they were worrying about the editing. Take the question out and let this stand alone. Just rephrase it. And now I think the biggest thing of training is just being in control and knowing that you can help the direction. You can help the direction. That's probably that's one thing that guys don't really realize they can do.
So who's your best favorite interview?
Oh, Lord. I mean this. I have so many that I look at through the years, and I've been so blessed. But
then maybe your top 5.
I love the ones I worked really hard for. And one of my favorites was Vince Young, and it was just one of my favorites because we were doing exactly what I told you, where I was waiting for the interview to start and sort of just talking about he just had a baby, and this is when he was starting at Tennessee, and just came off his first game. He was booed, and it's kind of when everything started unraveling. And we just come from spending the day at his camp, and he does great things with kids. And we were just kind of just talking. And then I knew we were rolling, and we were talking about his newborn baby. And I said to him, my first question was sort of something about, did you even have a childhood? Because he had a rough one. The first question of the interview, and he started going into literally how he began the answer, was, my mom's nickname was, my nickname as a child was Crack Baby. Because when your mom is the crack whore of the neighborhood, then that's what you're known for. And she'd bring men over all the time, and they'd put me in my room, and she'd put a sock over the door. But I was this tall, so I could poke the sock, and I could sit and watch them do drugs, and I could sit and watch them have sex. And that's how he grew up. And then he'd say what she would do, and she realized what he was doing. She'd kick him outside and make him play football until it was dark. And he'd get beat up every day because they were calling him Crack Baby. And that's what I mean with a great interview, where I just kind of quietly threw out everything I was going to talk about. Because when your first answer is that, and now all of a sudden it made me think, okay, so everybody was on him because he handled the booing so poorly. And I'm listening to all this, and I said to him, so at what point when you were being booed did you think of being called a crack baby? And he's like, that's all I thought about walking back, because I'd never been booed. You know, Tennessee, everyone loved him. He's like, it took me back to that little boy who was beat up every day and just that negativity. So those are those kind of interviews, whoever it is, you know, a coach, a player, when it's something like that that nobody's heard before and it's an honest conversation, I live for those.
Wow. What was your least favorite interview?
I would never tell you that.
Okay.
Never.
She wouldn't tell me that because Laura's somebody you can't trust, so she wouldn't tell you who the worst was.
There's some tough ones, but I look at it honestly. I never leave an interview and go, they were horrible, because I share the responsibility where I take that responsibility seriously. Of it's my job to get you to open up. Just because you're sitting down with me doesn't mean you're going to open up to me. So I'm real hard on myself with that someone might be a real bad interview, but I like that challenge of, okay, so how can I warm you up? How can I make you comfortable? How can I get you to say something? And when I don't, I look at that as a failure. And I might badmouth them for being a bad interview. But no, I really do look at that as it's a two-way street.
Well, is there anything else you want to say? Because we've already been talking for almost 30 minutes.
Have we really?
Yeah.
No, because it's 7:01 and I have a meeting at 7
Okay,
o'clock.
thank you, Laura. This was fabulous and so much fun.
I enjoyed it. Thank you so much.